Next, of course, the other enterprise platform you all know. Today I was looking at a very interesting chart. Michiel posted, Michiel Sintony from Nuon on LinkedIn. It looked almost like the Bitcoin price development, but it wasn't. It was actually the stock of Microsoft over the years since when it was founded until now. So it was interesting to see how they are developing, and I think it's really cool that Microsoft is working a lot with startups. They have all kinds of startup accelerators. BigChainDB, for instance, is at the startup accelerator in Berlin. I actually took a visit there, and I asked, why does Microsoft have a startup accelerator? And the answer was quite surprising to me, because I never thought about it. It could say something about me as well, but they're not in there to invest in the startups. They're in there because they have learned that startups weren't quite using their products. And so they are really engaging with the startups to learn how they can help startups grow and help them succeed and build products that actually are used by startups, and so they can help them better. So I really like that kind of interaction where a large company interacts with startups. Last year, of course, Hans and Astrid were also at the stage on the technical deep dive. Microsoft is working with Ethereum a lot, so I'm always looking on how the boundary between the open public blockchains and the enterprise blockchains are developing. And I'm really glad that Hans and Astrid are here today again. Hans Bos and Astrid Hackenberg. Please a warm hand of applause for Astrid and Hans.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that was a fantastic introduction. I thought he could continue with
Yes.
explaining what Microsoft Azure is about, etc. But great, Rutger. Let me first introduce Astrid to you.
Well, my name is Astrid Hackenberg. I work as actually I think I'm not sure if the title was somewhere on the slide, but I work as a software engineering manager within a new department of Microsoft, which exists still this summer, or since this summer, and it's called the Commercial Software Engineering Department. And basically, the one thing that we do is code with our customers on any kind of interesting project. So that's basically our job. And with that, I'm also closely connected with the Accelerator that is in Berlin that was just mentioned, but also with all other kind of projects with customers.
Great. And I'm Hans Bos, and I'm a technology officer for Microsoft in the Netherlands. And the technology officer is kind of like the ambassador of Microsoft to government, to large customers, to our partners in the Netherlands. And as such, I usually run into a lot of strategic conversations, either about the value of our technology or how to use our technology in a way that is compliant with legal or regulatory frameworks. But also, I would say, core to the discussion today, or the deep dive today, or the deep dive previously with the legal audience, or the deep dive before that with the Ridderzaal engagement with business, the core conversation usually tends to be trust. Can we still trust technology? Can we still trust technology vendors? Can we trust programmers? Can we trust, and you can fill in the blanks if you will. Because at the Ridderzaal event, I remember very clearly a lot of business contexts were really articulate about can we trust blockchain as a concept? Why can we trust blockchain as a concept? And at the legal deep dive, a lot of conversations was great blockchain, fantastic, but can we trust the developers? Can we trust the coders? And I would say that today, the technology deep dive, maybe the core conversation is can we trust the technology vendors? Can we trust the technology behind my brilliant blockchain code, if you will? And we wanted to highlight today a little bit about the Microsoft infrastructure that is available to you for use behind your own custom blockchain solutions, bespoke solutions, whatever technology you choose. We hope that we can explain and articulate why Microsoft would be the best infrastructure behind that. But first off, this is a talk that we didn't prepare. So it could be that I'm going to tell you something and that Astrid is going to interrupt me, because as a technology officer, it was 30 years, almost 30 years ago, that I started out as a software programmer, but as a technology officer nowadays, PowerPoint is my mostly used tool. So it could be that Astrid will interrupt me and say, Hans, you're wrong, you're outdated, or you're incomplete. Bear with me. First, I wanted to point out, if the clicker works, I wanted to point out that indeed today is not about reiterating what the blockchain is about, but I think it was repeated a couple of times already, that blockchain is always an element, a part of a solution. The blockchain is not the solution, blockchain is not the objective. The goal is some business problem or some organizational problem that ultimately blockchain could be an element and in the solution for. And as earlier mentioned, I was very much inspired by the ID 2020 project, the identification project, where indeed Microsoft is part of the technical solution. We're a founding member of the distributed identity framework, and we're participating in this scenario with Accenture, for example. We're using biometric interfacing, but we're also using the blockchain as a technology. But the best story, of course, is the result, where indeed millions of refugees are being processed or assisted or helped with finding their real, if you will, documentation identity, because the real identity is, of course, the person, the individual itself. But this is the great story, I think, the solution, and that the technology behind it is blockchain, that's fantastic, but the real story is the value that we managed to create and achieve. So that's just an example, I think.
Yep.
And another part is that a lot of conversation are indeed, and this is just not meant for reading, right? If you want the actual slides, come to us at the distributed Q&A. We can explain a lot about the solutions where we leverage blockchain. But the idea is indeed blockchain is part of the solution, and the real conversation that is going on in the market is about what business problems can we address, what business problems can we solve. And indeed, it's interesting that trust is so much or so often cited as a core issue or a core ask. And a key element in the conversation around blockchain and the adoption of blockchain is that we find that most conversations or most customers or most partners, they are at different levels of maturity regarding the conversation of blockchain. So personally, for example, I hope Astrid agrees, I think I may be at a level 2 of maturity on blockchain. I think I know a little bit about blockchain. I think it can articulate some of the potential solutions where blockchain plays a role. I think it can explain and leverage a little bit of the technology that we have in place around blockchain, but I'm definitely not up to a level 4, if you will, where I'm fully fluent in all kinds of blockchain technologies or programming blockchain solutions myself anymore. So I would argue I'm at level 2. That makes me part of the top 15%. I'm happy about that. But I understood that some of you, or maybe half of you, are at the top, if you will, 5% of this stack, which is great. But ultimately, all of us, we're working, I think, to get the majority of our contacts at our own organization, or the majority of our contacts at our customers or our partners. We are probably working as fast and as hard as possible to get the majority of them through these layers from level 1 to up to level 4. In Gartner terms, I would argue we are trying to get our contacts, our business contacts, our legal contacts, our customers, we're trying to get them as fast as possible through the hype cycle, through the trough of disillusionment, if you will, to the reality of blockchain. So I would say the majority of us are moving around this maturity levels. Most of our customers are still at level 1, but we're rapidly helping them get up to speed, up to level 4, if you will. To do that, Microsoft offers an open infrastructure, open technologies. We are open to multiple solutions, blockchain-based infrastructures, blockchain consensus models, etc. We offer, if you will, a global infrastructure layer that you can use in your own data center, at a partner data center, or you can use it from the Microsoft data center. The umbrella terminology that we often use, the product baseline, is the Microsoft Azure infrastructure.
Yeah, and I guess it's good maybe, Hans, to emphasize that what you see here on the slide are certain templates that you can use to quickly create blockchain environments, developer environments, or blockchains themselves running in the cloud. But these evolve a lot, so it's not a static thing. So where last year, when we were talking, we had this template to quickly create an Ethereum network on Azure, that was just like from the context of me installing something where I would go and do some development, basically, and simulate the idea of having several parties involved, etc. If you see where we are now, we have a template where you can quickly set up a blockchain, Ethereum blockchain network on Azure, where then somebody else can install their own Ethereum network and very easily become part of that bigger blockchain network, or the first part of the blockchain network being installed. So it can become a truly multi-party blockchain network with nodes running on different locations in different clouds, if you want, different data centers, etc. So there is a lot of evolution in here, where we see that our platform, of course, matures also with basically what happens in the industry, and also what are the real asks in the industry.
Indeed. So last year, I was indeed very happy that at Delft, at the Technology Deep Dive at Delft, we could launch a virtual machine with an Ethereum consortium by pressing a button, and 15, 20 minutes later we had a fully running Ethereum consortium. But now, as Astrid explained, the whole environment has matured. So not only can you fire up, if you will, an Ethereum consortium, you can even connect that to additional Azure services for data management, for example, business intelligence analysis, but also the identity and authentication frameworks of Azure. So there's a fully much more mature framework for you to use in your solutions, if you will. Do you want to elaborate a little bit on this?
Well, I think this is I guess the global picture of how we look at the blockchain ecosystem. Yeah. And so there are different types of blockchain networks. On top of that, you need, of course, very specific tooling, but also extra services, and on top of that you will build your logic. But I guess what might be more interesting is to see where we are now and what we offer for developers to actually go and make this reality, and
Sure.
So
you want to do the next slide?
Yeah.
Because the next slide is very well color coordinated, you'll find.
Oh, okay, cool.
See?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love it. So I don't have Bitcoin on my dress, but I definitely have the Azure color, I guess. So what you see here is...
So maybe we should test. Does everybody know about Microsoft Azure? Do you know what Microsoft Azure actually is? Most of you do, huh? Otherwise you can look it up via Bing or Google. Yeah. You'll be okay.
Exactly. And it is a beautiful color, but beside that, it's also a cloud platform. So yeah. So basically, what you see here is our Azure portal, and this is one of the options that you can use to use blockchain. This is about a dev test lab environment, very specific, where you can quickly add all kinds of different components that you want on your blockchain environment. So all kind of toolings, components that are there, you can quickly add them, and also this is really for development, so this is also about being able to schedule that your machines automatically turn off, let's say, at 7 in the evening, or 8 or 9 and 10, depending on what type of development schedule you're used to. So to also reduce basically the costs. Do you know if we also have the slides, the Lexington slides in here,
yeah,
Hans?
that's coming later.
Yeah, it's coming later. Okay, cool, cool. So this is basically where you find everything that is in our marketplace, and this is updated, of course, as soon as the things are added. And for example, you see There is a lot Ethereum-based, what we do on Azure, but that is not the only thing that we have. We really are blockchain agnostic, so that's really important. So everything that we are working on, all kind of frameworks and extra functionality is really blockchain agnostic. And as you can see, we also now have a Hyperledger Fabric single node template that you can quickly install on the Azure cloud if you want. So yeah, here you can find more information about that one if you want. So yeah, this was what I was looking for. Great. So basically what we have found is that this was basically often the ask from customers, where they came to us and they said, oh yeah, we need some ledger and we need a smart contract. And that sounds pretty simple and pretty straightforward. But what we found is that they were actually asking for this. So they were asking for a complete platform and blockchain being a very small part of it. But also things like, okay, yes, but what do we do now if we want to store some of the data of the chain? Oh, we need something extra, we need a data store. How are we going to access that blockchain from our application? Oh, we need APIs to actually be able to talk to it. So, okay, we're building we create a smart contract, but how can we actually use that smart contract? How does this become like an application or something like that? So I think that you can see that we are all coming basically to the conclusion that if it is not only about blockchain, if this is only a part of a solution, it makes sense to also look at it that way and to make sure that it will become easy to have blockchain just as a component in your solution. So with that, we started to working on something which is called Project Lexington. And Project Lexington basically gives you a template where you can create this. It's kind of a reference architecture, you could say, but not only that, it will actually create this for you, running on the cloud and ready to use. So you will have a blockchain network, you will have a data store for off-chain data, you will have an API that you can just simply use to connect to it. But other than that, we also doing something with giving you the possibility to define metadata on top of a smart contract. And in this case, the metadata is described in JSON. And if you describe your metadata in JSON, we will automatically create a graphical user interface for you that you can use to start working with your smart contract. And of course, if you do that, we will call the APIs that are in the cloud to actually run some code that you can write there. You can extend the code with your own logic and your own functionality. And we will store, of course, the smart contract and the transactions. We will store it on the blockchain for you and give you the opportunity to quickly have like more an end-to-end solution. And you can, of course, extend that if you want with, at the data side, we're starting to doing analytics and visualization on top of that data that is at the end being stored. It's not a complete application. You would still have to do your work as a developer, but it is, as I said, kind of like a reference architecture that is also there really to use, that is actually available if you start using this. So, and of course, you can change all this to your own needs. This is all open. You can find everything on GitHub. We have the links here, I think, to all where you can find it. So you can adjust it to your own needs. You can change it, and then create your own revised templates if you want to quickly get up to speed next time you start working with it. So here you can find actually where to deploy it. So I guess that brings us to the real world, Hans. And you know a lot about that one, I think. I know a lot about the developer world, and you know a lot about the real world.
I like to think that developers are part of the real world, though. But I get your point. So in earlier experiences with Lexington, I've seen it used as a template, indeed, for asset exchanges. But you were correcting me or completing me earlier on by saying, indeed, it's not just for asset exchange, right? It's very generic for multiple solutions.
Absolutely.
Have you seen it used for other solutions, like for example, in pharmacy or in energy business?
Yes, I did. And actually what I also see nowadays is that also a completely different type of solution. For example, in gaming, you see it also more and more used, and blockchain becoming more and more interesting for selling and buying and storing your assets when you play games. So that's a completely different type of solution.
Very good.
Yeah.
So we started out by explaining indeed that the whole concept, the majority of conversations end up being about trust, if you will. And we also explained or positioned quickly that Microsoft is about infrastructure, offering you the potential to rapidly speed up your deployment to the market or to your customers. And some of our customers, some of our conversations tend to be, and as Rutger positioned us, tend to be enterprise level, if you will. So they tend to be slightly different or emphasize different aspects or have different demands, if you will, to the solution. And at a number of conversations in the enterprise market, customers told us, right, fantastic, this blockchain solution, this infrastructure, brilliant, but what about getting the number of transactions, transaction speed, that is similar to a database? Or what about latency in a blockchain scenario? And those are the kinds of conversations that you don't want to have at the end of your proof of concept, by the way. You want to have the conversation about latency and database comparisons, etc., as early on, of course. But in many enterprise scenarios, there was a conversation about, okay, blockchain is fantastic, so is it about replacing my database? It's not. And there are certain issues and problems and challenges about scalability, performance-wise, and about latency that we probably need to address early on in the conversation, or we need to address in the technology, if you will. And another one is about confidentiality. You do not, as Astrid mentioned already, there is of course the potential technology-wise to store data on the chain and to store data off the chain. A certain number of data might make sense to store it on the chain, but the majority of confidential data, encrypted data, documents or whatever, probably will not make sense to store that on the chain. You will leave it off chain. But still, you want to make it part of your trusted environment. You want to make it part of your blockchain solution, if you will. So we're looking at majority of enterprise conversations where the customer says, okay, I need more granularity, need more agility, more flexibility on the confidentiality models that I have, leveraging blockchain, but still confidentiality models for the data being processed or analyzed or handled. And another one is about the governance model as a whole for your consortium. So these are, if you will, the three core conversations where it used to be we may not have had the best answer from a blockchain perspective so far. But, as was mentioned in the interview prior to this event, one of the most talked about from the Microsoft perspective, one of the most talked about announcements recently was about the COCO framework. Have you heard about the COCO framework already? Not too many people. Interesting. So it's a confidential consortium model, if you will, COCO framework. What COCO framework does, or is going to do, because to be honest, it's not yet available, we have just announced it in August, I believe August 15th or something. Yeah. We've announced it in August, and at that announcement we also mentioned that it will be made available early 2018 as an open source framework published on GitHub. But what COCO framework does, it addresses all these issues that enterprise customers have told us they are experiencing or that they find as a barrier to adopting blockchain for their solutions. COCO framework addresses most of these concepts or these challenges. I want to take a step back first to explain a little bit about the COCO framework context. First, Microsoft runs data centers. We run global data centers. We have a global data center infrastructure. But we also have software to be run from our partner data centers in the Netherlands, for example. And we have, of course, software that can be run in the customer data center or your own data center, if you will. In the Microsoft data centers, one of the conversations we have with customers is, can we trust, there you have it again, can we trust Microsoft? Can we trust the Microsoft data centers? So we have a very strong, a very holistic, a very complete story about why we think and also why independent third parties validate that the Microsoft data centers and the Microsoft infrastructure can indeed be trusted. But still, maybe you want to use and leverage the infrastructure of Microsoft data centers without being dependent, if you will, trust-wise, on Microsoft knowledge, Microsoft confidentiality, etc. You want to not only have your data transmitted, encrypted, and secure to the Microsoft data centers, not only do you want to have your data encrypted at transmission, you also want to have your data encrypted at storage, at rest, but you also actually, in some scenarios, you want to have your data encrypted while it's being processed. Now that's of course very difficult, because how can you add up two encrypted data elements, or how can you compare two encrypted data elements, etc. Now it turns out that we've already solved many of those aspects. We've got a product called Microsoft SQL Server Always Encrypted, which allows you to process data in an encrypted way. The customer holds the key on premises with the customer side. The data is encrypted at the customer side. The data is transmitted to the Microsoft data center encrypted. It's there stored in an encrypted way. But then the customer can also submit a query to the SQL Server Always Encrypted in an encrypted way. Microsoft, nobody sees what is happening inside the database, but still we can process a number, a subset of operators on that encrypted data. So
I think we have to speed up our Coco story, Hans, because Rutger is getting on our feet. So I think we have to point people to either the distributed Q&A later, or also maybe you want to tell that we have also an option next week to learn a bit more about it.
Well, there you go. We have an option next week to learn more about it, and you can visit us at the distributed Q&A. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about the COCO framework. The element is indeed that we've solved, if you will, the technology behind encrypted, continuous encrypted, processing while the data is in an encrypted state. And we're leveraging that insight for use at the blockchain context in the COCO framework. So what we're doing, we're leveraging hardware-based trusted execution environments as an enclave, we call it, kind of like an isolated area in the compute systems in our data centers. It's an enclave. You can verify that whatever you put in that enclave is actually stored in that enclave, but it's never going to leave that enclave in an encrypted way. It stays encrypted as soon as it leaves the enclave. In the enclave, it's unencrypted, but nobody has visibility inside the enclave. So what this concept solves, and there's a brilliant technology white paper about it, is one of the barriers in blockchain, in the latency or the speed of processing, transaction speed, is that you no longer may need proof of concept, proof of work, etc., proof of commit. You can have the enclave itself provide the assurance of the proof of work. And that speeds up tremendously the number of transactions that you can process, because that element is no longer, if you will, needed in the algorithm. This slide demonstrates it. This is not about competing with Ethereum. Both models use Ethereum, but on the left-hand side, it's Ethereum running in the COCO framework context, and on the right side, it's, if you will, the common Ethereum implementation. And what you see here is a magnitude of 100 times speeding up the process of transactions, committing transactions to the system, only because indeed the trusted execution environment available in the Microsoft Azure context, that resolves or that solves the proof of work problem, if you will, on latency and transaction processing. So I think it's brilliant, and I want to wrap up.
You're very passionate about it, Hans.
I want to tell you that you can hear more about the Q&A.
Very good.